I'm photographer David Duchemin, and this is Vision is Better, a sometimes weekly podcast about the craft and art of photography. Welcome here.
Hey everybody, today I want to talk to you about photographing people. I get emails almost every single week saying, David, how do I photograph people? Have you got any tips? Have you got any tricks? And I don't have any tips or tricks for photographing people. I get emails that, and I'm exaggerating a little, that basically say, David, I am terrified of photographing people. I am profoundly introverted. How can I make better photographs of people? And if that's the situation, I would suggest that maybe you don't make photographs of people. If you're that scared of initiating conversation with another human being, perhaps this isn't your gig, because there are no tips and tricks. There's no, despite the little icons on our cameras that have a little face, there's no secret setting for photographing people. There are lots of tips that I can give you to make the photographs better, to pay attention to the eyes and to pay attention to the light and the moment, things that make almost every photograph what it is. But in terms of what really makes a great photograph of a person, it's the relation stuff, the relationships. It's the way that we interact, the way that we show curiosity and respect. And you can't reduce it to, well, I'm just naturally extroverted and so I'm good at it, because I am not naturally extroverted. I'm in fact profoundly introverted. I like my alone time. I get peopled out very quickly. But I am interested in people. I'm curious about people. My curiosity doesn't come through in asking a lot of questions. It comes through in observing. And so for me to go up close to someone and make their photograph, it is not a natural thing. And I don't know a way to get over the fear other than just to do it. I am more nervous about returning home without photographs that mean something to me. I'm more scared of returning home without encounters, even though those encounters will be difficult. It is challenging for me to walk up to someone in India, have no common language, and expect myself to come up with a compelling photograph. But it's not that hard if you show curiosity, if you show respect. I generally start fairly far back and take sort of wider contextual shots and try very hard to not look threatening, not be that guy with the big long lens. I like cameras that I can look down at and give a less predatory look to the process. The big lenses and bringing it up to the eye is quite predatory looking for a lot of people. The natural desire is to have language, so we can go up and say, hi, how are you? My name is David. And while that I think is helpful at times, it's not that hard to find someone that can help you with language if it's that important to you. But it's also not that hard to communicate non-verbally. If you're okay with being a little bit awkward, if you're okay with communicating intention and emotion rather than information and details, then there's no reason why you can't go up to someone and just shake their hand, and even though they understand not a lick of English, say to them, hi, my name's David, I'm from Canada. You know they don't understand. They're going, why is he talking to me in English? But the way that you speak to them communicates respect, it communicates curiosity. And when you say to them, and bring your camera up and you say, may I make a photograph of you, it's very clear what you're asking them. And if you are humble and kind, these sort of things show in your face and in your tone of voice. So I don't think there's a technique. There are certainly, of course, techniques for making the photograph look better. That's not what I'm referring to. If you want to make better photographs of people, especially when you travel, and I'm assuming that the questions that I get are people that are not traveling with someone that maybe speaks the language and can just introduce them. This is kind of cold contact stuff. Get on their level, spend some time. You cannot do it rushing through. And, I spend time in places like Kathmandu, and I go and I will sit with the sadhus, that it's part of their routine to ask for money, and tourists come and they make the photograph. And I'm so tired of watching these, forgive my language, these total arseholes, walking up to a sadhu, not making eye contact, picking up their camera, sticking it in their face, taking the photograph, and then walking off looking at the photograph, ignoring the person that's asking for for a couple coins. Whether or not you give is not the point of the video. I generally tend to. Because I think being generous and hospitable and kind are more important than saving $1, and it's usually less than that. But I guess my point is you got to spend the time. The going in and photographing people like they're in a zoo. Not only does it not work, but the photographs that you come out with will show that kind of. If not hostility, certainly that lack of respect. It's just look at this guy in a turban, and it's not the kind of photographs most of the people that listen to my show, that read my stuff, want. If you want deeper photographs of people, you have to put the time in. It doesn't have to be full of conversation, but sit next to them and be okay with the awkwardness. Show them photographs of your family back home on your iPhone, or even show them photographs that you've made this morning on the back of your camera. Engage with them in some fashion, and slowly, as it's appropriate, and this is where you consult your years of people skills, you know when it's okay to photograph and raise the camera to your face. And if they say no, I usually play along with that. And if the situation's right, I say, oh, please, you're so good looking, please don't make me go home without it. And, sometimes I'll take a goofy selfie of me and show them. And that sense of humor comes across in your in your relationship. And even if it's a brief 30-second exchange, you can do it relationally. So that's my big encouragement to you, is stop trying to reduce this to tips and tricks and techniques, because though those are out there for the appearance of the photograph, the thing that will make the biggest difference is realizing, one, most of us are a little bit nervous about this, if not downright scared. It hasn't gone away for me in all these years, but I just go on, I take a deep breath and I go, hi, my name's David, and if you've learned a little bit of Hindi, Mera naam David hai, main Kannada se hu. And they laugh because that's just terrible Hindi. But they understand it and they go, oh, Mr. David. And even if that's all the Hindi that I speak, I've communicated some respect and some curiosity. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to talk about is this issue of model releases. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so you shouldn't be asking me questions about model releases. However, if what you're asking is, David, how do you use model releases? The answer is, I rarely use model releases. When I'm out photographing in the street, wherever I am, the chance of me being in a place where I have a model release in their language, in a place where they speak that language and, are like literate, they can read and write, the chance of that happening is pretty slim. Do I want to interrupt my workflow and the opportunity to make these photographs and the relationship I develop with trying to explain a legal document? Please sign here in triplicate and fill out your name. So for me, it doesn't work. If I am on assignment for a humanitarian organization, I usually have someone there with me, someone that speaks the language. They require me, the client requires me to have a model release, and so I use one according to what they have asked me for. I have used recently model releases in Africa, and coming back and trying to use them for stock, because it is an illiterate culture in which I'm photographing. We use thumbprints, and the thumbprints, even though we have the name and the village and the thumbprints, I was told by my stock agency that they wouldn't accept them. So those get submitted purely for editorial. They won't be used for commercial applications, and I'm okay with that. Generally speaking, you need a model release for publishing, and it depends how you want to publish. And I personally don't prefer to introduce that into my way of working. If you were working in such a way that the client said you need a model release, then you need a model release. If you know that your stock agency requires a model release, then you need a model release, and you need to figure out how you're going to do that, whether you get it translated ahead of time and hope someone speaks the language, whether you hire a fixer that speaks the language for you to get these filled out and signed. That would be one way of doing it. But just to make the photograph, you do not need a model release. The model release says, I have been photographed by this particular photographer, and I'm okay with it being used for publication. That's the gist of a model release. Do I use them? Not very often. And when I use them because I have been told that I need them by a client or a stock agency. And the trade-off in terms of how I work and needing someone to interpret is worth that trade-off. It's not very often for me. Other people will have a different answer to that question. But if you're asking me, David, do you use model releases? Not very often. Get out there with your camera, keep it in your pocket until you've made some relationships and some contacts. That's why I like the smaller cameras. I can keep them out of the way. If I get out of the truck and I want to speak to someone and I know I want to photograph them, they've got these great faces, and the last thing I do, and it's taken me a long time to get here, the last thing I do is whip out the camera. And by the last thing, I mean literally the last thing. I go and I sit and I ask questions, or I pantomime, or I do something to engage so that when the camera comes out, I've established some right to be there and the right to ask the question, may I photograph you? And it's based on the fact that we've had an exchange. Oh, of course you can photograph me. There's a reason, other than just you jumping out of the Land Rover and running towards someone with your guns blazing. My experience tells me that doesn't work very well. So forget the tips and tricks. Learn to be comfortable with the awkward silences, learn a little bit of the language, and then see what you get. Please don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel. It's new, we're working out the kinks, but it's growing and it's exciting. Most important for me, if you have questions, leave them in the comments so that I can kind of get some idea of what would be good material for the next show. We'll see you next time. Remember, gear is good, but vision's better.